Thank you so much for joining me on Spectacle.
Thank you for inviting me. I was on a weird tour rough tour, when I got the call about this show. And I was thinking, how am I gonna do this? You know, I had so much going on, but I said, I gotta figure out a way to do it. And we did it.
Well, we're here in the world-famous Apollo Theater in Harlem, which is another great reason to be making this show, to do this show in this place. For a lot of people like myself who grew up in, I suppose, I would say the beat group era, not even rock and roll era, because the Beatles and all of that kind of music. Right. And with rhythm and blues, the Apollo is really associated with James Brown. But Smokey Robinson was here as a guest on Spectacle, and he reminded me, of course, the history of the Apollo goes back to jazz. Ella Fitzgerald made her debut here. There was a whole class of jazz musicians from the very beginnings who had a great sense of being revolutionary musicians and entertainers, or people who were capable of expressing themselves to a broad audience. Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Louis Armstrong.
Yeah. And I believe in your era, you also, while playing the most rigorous music imaginable, have that sense of the audience. Is that true? You have that sense of wanting to communicate?
Oh, absolutely. I'm interested in human beings and what kinds of avenues I can find that can possibly relate to people on various levels.
You began with classical music.
Right.
You're a classically trained pianist. Mm-hmm. Miles Davis was quoted as saying that he went to the library to look at classical scores when he was coming up, and was surprised that other jazz musicians didn't do so. Now, there are a few notable jazz musicians who don't read music, but most of them do.
Right.
But not all of them invest in a curiosity in classical music. Do you feel it gave you extra ammunition as a composer to study these fundamentals and the works of the classics?
Well, for me, because I started with classical music, even though I started taking classical piano lessons, I was also listening to rhythm and blues. I'm from Chicago.
Yeah.
You know, if you're from Chicago, you're gonna hear the blues. Yeah. Yeah. So I was listening to both classical music and rhythm and blues. But jazz, I wasn't into because I thought you had to be older to play jazz. You know, you had to be at least 19. You know. But then, when I was about 14, at one of the concerts at my high school, there was a guy who was in my class that had a jazz trio. And he was improvising on my instrument, the piano. So here's a guy in my class that could do something I couldn't do on my instrument. And it sounded good, too. I like the beat, you know.
Because it is hard. People don't realize that if you walk up to a classical pianist and take away the music, some of them can't carry on playing.
Yeah, for the most part, they can't. And for me, what classical music did was to give me a foundation about just the mechanics of music and structure of music. So by the time I got to jazz, I already had that kind of foundation. I also had been trained in having a correct posture. There are a lot of musicians that have wound up with troubles with their shoulders or with their backs or necks, and sometimes they've gotten to be very serious problems over the years. But I've never had any problems with, oops, sorry. No. No, I've never had, no, I never had any problems with my body playing the instrument. And I think it's because I sit correctly and because I use my fingers correctly.
Pianistic technique is, you would say, there is a different matter between jazz musicians and classical musicians, subtly speaking. But obviously...
I had to learn. I had to learn how to swing. Because when I came up in jazz, they didn't have jazz taught in schools. I think there was one school in America that taught jazz, and it was a college. But, and it was in California. It wasn't in Chicago. So I had to learn jazz from the streets, from the other musicians, and from listening to records and copying things off of records. I would listen to things that I liked, and what's he playing? How's he doing that? And
transcribing.
Transcribing it, yeah. And And then I would transcribe the notes and sit and play the notes and then listen to what the jazz pianist was playing. It would be the same notes, but it didn't sound the same. You know, his was swinging and mine wasn't. And why? How is he doing that?
So you've combined your classical discipline with what you learned and the huge career that you had to date and continuing in jazz. There's one record from 1998 where these two worlds collide, Gershwin's world. It's a record I really found incredible.
Yeah.
So you must have held it in your heart, is that true to say, the idea of examining Gershwin in this way?
Yeah, he certainly is a seminal figure in American music and bridging also across to classical music. And I actually called the record Gershwin's World because if it wasn't for jazz, who would know who Gershwin was?
Is there a Gershwin song that is close to your heart that you can play a few bars of just to hear how it works upon your imagination?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the song Embraceable You. I mean, so many people love that song, you know. And actually on my record, I reharmonize it in such a special way that I always had to have the music there because I could never remember what I did with it, you know. And since I don't have the music here of that particular harmonization, I'm not even gonna try try it that way. But Gershwin's music always had amazing harmonic interest, you know, and let's see if I can do a little bit of it. So forth, yeah.
In 1960, I think, you had a hit record with your first, derived from your very first album as a leader. So Watermelon Man, which was a big hit with the groovy pop crowd and groovy R&B crowd as well, beyond jazz musicians. Did you have a sense when you were recording that this might travel out?
Well, actually, at the time, I was Donald Byrd's roommate, great jazz trumpeter from Detroit. And I was really his protege. He discovered me and brought me from Chicago to New York to play in his band. He was the one that told me, okay, it's time for you to do your first record as a leader. I said, no, I'm not ready. He said, you're ready. So he said, here's how it works with record companies. He said, half the record is for you, half is for the record company. And I said, what does that mean? He says, well, half the tunes can be your originals and the other three have to be something that people actually know or get a sense of, that they know, So I said, let me wonder if I can approach that. And I started thinking about what can I write honestly about the Black experience, my own personal Black experience, since the funky sound really comes from the Black experience, What can I write about? I couldn't write about chain gangs because I'd never been to jail, you know. I couldn't write about work songs because I hadn't worked in the cotton fields. I was born in Chicago, right? The Watermelon Man. What could be more ethnic than that? The Watermelon Man going through the alleys of Chicago, you know. So I said, well, how can I capture that feeling of the Watermelon Man? And I started thinking about the cobblestone alleys of Chicago. That it was a horse-drawn wagon and a cart going over the cobblestones. You know, maybe I can capture something that has a rhythm that's inspired by that. That's how I came up with it. That was a rhythmic thing.
Well,
and then I started thinking about what did the Watermelon Man say? You know, what kind of melody did he? Because he would sing something.
Yeah.
But it was watermelon, red ripe watermelons, and some little song. And I said, well, that's not really that melodic in a song sense. And I started thinking, what about the ladies leaning over their back porch saying, hey, Watermelon Man. And I started thinking, hey, Watermelon Man. That's how I came up with it. Watermelon Man. That's how I came up with that. But what I didn't know was something that I found out, again, thanks to Donald Byrd, when he had a conversation with Mongo Santa Maria, when I played for my first time with a Latin group. And Mongo Santa Maria, a great Cuban conguero that passed away quite a few years ago, they were having a conversation about relationship between Afro-Cuban and Afro-American music. And Mongo had said that he never found a thing that was really the link between the two. So I'm half hearing the conversation, and finally Donald says, hey, Herbie, why don't you play Watermelon Man for Mongo? You know, so I went up on the piano and I started playing. And I started playing this, and little by little, the musicians started picking it up. Pretty soon, everybody was dancing. Mongo got on his congas. When he got on his congas, all of a sudden something clicked. And he said, it's a Guajira beat, you know, and it worked with Watermelon Man perfectly.
And so, you know, now we'd call it world music, but I mean, it was just a spontaneous,
yeah.
a spontaneous
so it
beat.
became a huge hit, you know, not only here in the States, but all over Latin America, too.
Well, could we try?
Okay, here we go with Watermelon Man. First, we're going to do it a little bit, the kind of original way that I wrote it back in 1962. And then we're going to switch to a version that's more like what the Headhunters did in 1973.
McBride, Karriem Riggins.